Welcome everyone, a very good morning across Europe. I hope it's as sunny where you are as it is in London today. My name is Eloise Shuttleworth and I'm the Senior Director of Customer Success at Iterable. Iterable is a data-driven cross-channel marketing platform, and we work with brands around the world, including Zoopla, Fit and Strava, all of whom I know have taken the stage already at the App Promotion Summit, to unify their customer experiences and ensure the right people are getting the right message at the right time on the right channel. And mobile is one of those key channels for us. So I'm really excited to be joined today by an exceptional panel of product leaders who'll be chatting with me about what it takes to build a successful app product. So Jasper, Amrik and Leah, I would love it if you could do a quick introduction to kick things off, and also tell us what app you can't live without. And just as a quick word of warning, it can't be your own, even though I'm sure you would all say that if you could. So Leah, why don't we start with you and then we'll hand it over to Jasper and Amrik.
Hi, Eloise. Thanks for having us. So my name is Leah. I'm currently the lead product manager in a company called Uptime, which is an edtech startup where what we're doing is we're building 5-minute knowledge hacks from the best books, courses, and documentary. So whenever you have a bit of downtime and you're not too sure what to do, well, you can get some knowledge and actually have a positive experience. I've been there for a couple of years, so it's a very exciting journey. And sorry, the product I can't live without is maybe not the most original one, but in this pandemic time, I think WhatsApp has been a bit of my lifesaver. Keeping contact with my family, friends all around the world it's just been a must-have for the last few months. So
I would definitely agree with that. Yep. Awesome. Thank you so much, Leah. I'm handing it over to you, Jasper.
Sure. Thank you very much, Louise. So I'm Senior Product Manager at Moonpig, in charge of the mobile app teams, and I've been here for just 4 years and 2 days now, actually. My anniversary was on the 23rd of March.
Congratulations.
A very good momentous occasion. So I started out in Moonpig in the design team, so I was a UX designer here, and then made the transition into product. So I've been in charge of the app team for about 2.5 years now. So I've seen it growing from the forgotten platform and team that sat in the corner to being a core part of the Moonpig strategy, and a regular appearance in the #1 position on the App and Play Store, and now to a really good place in the company. So it's been quite a nice journey to see them go on. And in regards to my favorite app, in normal times, it's going to be the Santander Cycles app. So I commute to work and miss that greatly, but you get the train and there's like a 10-minute bike ride to the office, and if you're the first person out and you have to fiddle around at the ticket machine, it's an absolute faff. So if you're using the app, you're like, bam, I'm in there. But I guess in lockdown times, more honestly, it's probably Deliveroo.
Very nice. That's up there on my list as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. And rounding it out with Amrik.
Hi everyone, thanks Eloise. I'm Amrik. I'm a lead product manager for Which, focused on mobile apps. So I think like everyone listening in and everyone on the panel, I love building apps. So I'm really excited about this panel talk. I've been at Which now for around 6 months. And prior to this, I've worked on apps at the Financial Times, OVO Energy, Nando's, and more recently KFC. And more broadly, I've been in product now for just over a decade, so quite a while. I'm now leading a team that are rebuilding the Which mobile app and creating a new mobile strategy. For those of you that might not be familiar with Which or who we are the UK's consumer champion. So we empower consumers to avoid and tackle harm. So, for example, with dealing with being scammed, as well as encouraging businesses and policymakers to do better. A good example is our lab tested product reviews. So we're at quite an interesting time in our history with a renewed focus on our product strategy and really building a more product-led culture. So I'm really looking forward to sharing my experience with everyone. One app that I can't live without right now, I would have to say Google Photos. It just has a really great user experience. I feel like they've tackled the problem space really, really well. It makes it so easy for me to find old photos and videos, and they harness the power of what Google are really good at, and that's search. So you can find photos that you kind of never knew existed, and it just gives me confidence that whenever I take a photo, it's safely backed up to the cloud, and I never have to worry. So overall, I think that's a really well designed and built app.
Fantastic. I just bought a dishwasher, Amrik, which was critical to my buying decision. So thank you very much for that. I'm really excited that you're all here today. You each have fantastic app products, so I can't wait to dig in and hear your top tips and strategies. But before we do that, I'm curious to find out why each of your businesses decided to have an app in the first place. Maybe Jasper, if we can start with you and Moonpig. I know that Moonpig is known for selling greeting cards, flowers and gifts, and also having an incredibly catchy jingle that I can't get out of my head whenever I hear it. But having such a massive online and offline presence, what made the business invest in an app?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I figure I should probably start off by saying what Moonpig does, because we've got quite an international group of people today. So Moonpig is a 20-year-old business, started out to allow people to personalize greeting cards. So unlike the ones you buy at the high street, you can go online and you can change the name, add a photo, and make it that bit more unique and personal to represent the special relationship you have with that person that you're giving it to. And yes, it does have a very catchy jingle, and the jingle, in fact, up until a couple of years ago, literally had the words .com in it. So for me and my role at Moonpig, a lot of it's been trying to work out, well, why should we have an app? And also that's core to like how we convince customers to also download an app. Most people think of us as a website business, not helped by the jingle, obviously, which has now changed, so it doesn't say it as explicitly. But for Moonpig, our average customer buys about 24 cards per year, and those customers buy on average about 3.5 cards from us. So for Moonpig, and we're obviously trying to capture more of that share. That's what we're always trying to do. And when you think about it from a consumer perspective, well, why would they download an app for something they're going to use 3.5 times a year? So for us, we really need to look at what more can an app do that a website can't, and looking at how we can increase people's frequency. So that's really the core for us. And as a business, we know that by migrating someone to the app, we increase their frequency. And really the opportunity there is just capture more of that 24 card share per year. So we know that things on apps are better for native experiences like photo editing and manipulation and stuff like that. So that's a big factor for what we look at in the app and how we try and frame it to customers. But what we're really looking at now to try and convince more people to install is what can't a website do. So push notifications, they're a really important part for us. They cut through the noise of email a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And a big motivation for our customers is making sure that they remember people's birthdays. A really strong motivating factor is not forgetting your partner or your mom's birthday. So there's that customer motivation to make sure they employ things that help them be better at birthdays. And that's kind of like one of the visions that we have for the app, is that it makes people better at birthdays. So looking at things like push notifications, looking at how we can use your native photo experience better, native interactions, and these then start to become motivators for people to choose the app instead of the website, which we know then leads to frequency. So there's quite a few benefits that we see from those native experiences that then lead to better business outcomes. So that's the reasons we have an app.
Awesome. What about you, Amrik?
Yeah, I really like this question. It kind of makes us think really hard about, the purpose of a product. I think when we think back in time and we go back over a decade ago when, the first few smartphones really went mainstream, I think most publishing companies really rushed to replicate their physical experience into a digital format, so that members could read the content without needing to have the magazine or the newspaper physically with them. So what you would kind of have is this PDF reader experience where you could swipe through content, but just on an app. And at which we actually still have this, we call it the magazine app. But I think when we fast forward to today, and at which when we ask ourselves, okay, why do we need an app? What is the purpose of having an app? I think it comes down to two things, and actually they're quite similar to what Jasper said with Moonpig. I think firstly is the experience that you can create with an app. You can create something that engages users, which you can't quite replicate with a website. So, tapping into the device hardware, the camera, the location, although you can do that on the browser, it's more intuitive. It's a lot faster doing it via a native app. I think the interaction design you can build out in an app tends to be a lot smoother. You know, the transitions between elements, transitions between screens, and you can kind of create something that really delights your users. And it's also, for us, it's there at the point of need. If, for example, you're offline, you're on your daily commute, you can open the app and you can find ways to have the content surface to your users. And then the second thing I would say is, I think the connection that you can create with your members, that fostering deeper customer relationships. Jasper mentioned, you know, push notifications. I think that's really key for us as well. And there's something also, I think, interesting about being on a member's home screen on their phone that can really build your brand. You know, I saw some stats the other day that says the average person unlocks their phone 60 odd times a day. I mean, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, when you dig deeper and you kind of hone in on Gen Zs and millennials, that could be upwards of 150 times a day. So for us, if we think, okay, if your logo is seen 150 times a day, it kind of just reinforces that brand in that person's mind. So it becomes top of mind more often when they're looking to solve a problem that they know your product solves. Who's the one that they're going to go to? It's the one that's on their home screen more often than not. So I think, yeah, that's kind of why we think having an app is really important at Which.
I love that reason. I can absolutely see that being, you know, a golden rule as well, thinking about the apps that I have on my phone and how frequently I'm opening that. So thank you, Amrik. That's fantastic. And Leah, on your side, I mean, Uptime is primarily app driven, right? So if you could talk us through your reasonings behind that, that would be great.
Yeah, so for us, it's slightly different. We really thought about what is it we're trying to achieve, and what we want to do is ensure that whenever someone has a bit of a downtime, have a few minutes during the day, they can actually have an easy access to knowledge. So an app made sense because you always have your phone with you, right? You always have access to your phone. You can do it on your commute. You can do it pretty much anywhere. And so it was the idea of, if we do have an app, you will always have this access to knowledge anywhere, anytime. It's a natural fit. I think for us, the question is more, do we need a website? Is there any need for a web presence? Because the app is a product, the app is the experience. Is there any need for additional mediums? So it's a slightly different way of looking at it, I suppose.
Yeah, such a fantastic question. Do we need a website? I think you and I will have to come back to that at some point, Leah, and discuss that a little bit more. But thank you so much for sharing. And hearing about your apps just at a high level and the reasons why you have them, I'm super excited to dig into kind of your tips and tricks and see a little bit more under the hood. So I think we can all agree that, you know, in the last year, we've seen a huge amount of digital transformation. And with that, all of the figures say there's been a massive spike in mobile and app engagement. And I think when I initially look at those figures, you know, I tend to think about acquisition strategies and how brands are capturing the engagement of their audience sort of that first time in the last year. But having spoken to all three of you, what I'm actually more fascinated about is that retention phase of the customer journey, how we're looking to keep these customers that we've acquired during the lockdown period, and how that influences your app development. So I know that Jimmy, who leads the product marketing team at one of our customers, Fit TV, actually spoke last week at the App Promotion Summit about how important customer retention and engagement was to the growth of their business. So I'd love to hear from each of you about sort of the acquisition versus retention strategy when it comes to your businesses and what you're focused on, therefore, when it comes to your app experience. Do we maybe want to start with you, Jasper, and then we'll pass it over to Leah?
Yeah, sure. So I guess there's two parts to our growth strategy at Moonpig, and acquisition being the first part. And if we switched off the website, that would really help with my metrics. I think if you could put up a couple of things to say. It's a really interesting question, though, because, you know, if we were to start our business again today, it begs the question, would you start with a website or would you start with an app? But for our strategy at the minute, in terms of app growth, acquisition, a lot of that, you know, we're a 20-odd-year-old business and people have always chosen the website. So we need to think about our strategy in those two ways of, okay, how do we build to enable acquisition of people? And that's by what I mentioned previously, and what Amrik was mentioning, like what can an app do that the website can't, and building those things that, you know, push notifications are great because you can speak to those customer needs around, I don't want to forget an occasion. But what we're trying to do to enable acquisition is make things that people really like the idea of and like the sound of. So our more engaged customers tend to be on the app, and they tend to be those more creative people. So we have looked at features around how you can let people actually handwrite their message, because it's really important for them. They feel like they've actually been able to come up with better words because they've written it out by hand. It's quite an interesting thing that people say when they look at a handwritten birthday card. They feel like they've actually put more emotion into it than when they've typed it, and that's a really important thing for them to achieve. So we've been building features that allow you to write your message out by hand and then take a picture of it that gets scanned, made transparent, and added to the card. And the, you know, outcome is amazing. People are so impressed by how realistic it looks. So those are things that we do to try and, you know, look at what our customers trying to achieve, what are the things they want to do, and how do we make the app fulfill those way better than any other platform could. And those just become really great things for them to start talking to people about, because, you know, it's great things to put into a TV ad, to talk about on radio, to have on our social campaigns as little how-to videos. And I think people really like seeing those like insider tips on how to hack your product or how to do something different with it. So those are really nice things for us to talk about, and they help with acquisition. But for us, retention is obviously the big thing. And once we actually get someone in, there's no point in them saying, well, this app is a miniature website, this is rubbish, I'm going to go back. So retention and frequency are the biggest things that we're focusing on. And we've looked at the cohort analysis for someone who migrates and someone who doesn't. And we know that by migrating someone to the app, we increase their frequency by 15%. And for us, that's about looking at retention primarily, and then looking at serving those needs better and speaking to them at the right points. So it's just the one most important metric for us in our team that we're trying to always drive. So when I think about retention for us, there's promoters of retention, and those are things like setting a reminder, enabling notifications, using those USPs that we know are promoters. And then there's the detractors. So I talked about people wanting to employ tools that stop them forgetting. Well, that's one part to it. But if someone does everything right with our products, ultimately we send a lot of our things through Royal Mail, and you know, we get most things there very next day, and we have a really, really good fulfillment and factory solution that gets it there most of the time perfectly. But just by nature of our scale, you'll have the odd anomaly where someone who is a very loyal customer has trusted us for their mom's birthday card and it arrives a couple of days late. And, you know, that can be a real problem. And it's those sort of detractors that, you know, it could be a very small purchase price for that actual basket, but the impact of the customer is massive at that point. So for us and the app, we're looking a lot at how we can improve the, you know, end-to-end experience. It's not just about when someone lands and opens the app, it's about what happens after they press pay, because people remember the peaks of your experience and they remember the end. And if the last touch point they have with you is pressing pay, it's not a very good experience. So, you know, someone for Moonpig is sending primarily gifts, and they, you know, unlike Amazon, don't know if it's arrived because it's going to someone else. So we really look at that end of the experience, because that's where there's a lot of anxiety and stuff that's going on there. And that's where the app has real benefit. It's about that post-order support. How do we tell them where it is, keep them up to date? Is it coming in 2 packages? Is it coming in 1? When are they going to be delivered? And that's where we start to provide that real concierge type service to people. And that's the stuff that really helps with retention as well. You know, people remember that because it's the last touch point, and then they have a good experience, and great, they're going to remember you for next time. What I will say is retention on a product where people come 4 times a year to buy something, it's always really hard to measure. And I really envy those daily use apps, because I'm not saying it's ever easier, but for us, what we do is we will look at things like leading indicators of retention. So things I mentioned to you. So how many people set a reminder, how many people opt into push notifications, and looking at your product and thinking, what are the things that someone will do that's going to lead to them having a good experience, to them coming back? So retention for us is a lot more based on the user research and gut feel. And there's obviously that longer term where you can actually measure it. But if you want to understand your impacts in the short term, you have to rely on those really short term metrics and a bit of gut feel and listening to your users. So yeah, retention is a really big thing for us at Moonpig and is always something we're thinking a lot about.
Yeah, and I really want to dig into metrics, and then also something that you mentioned, Jasper, which is almost that voice of the user and how that influences sort of the creation and modification of the app. So I'm going to note those down as things we'll touch on in just a few moments' time. But Amrik, how about you when it comes to sort of acquisition versus retention?
Yeah. Like, firstly, I mean, wow, what a year, right? 2020, what a year that's been for apps. I think some of the figures that I've read, 30% growth in app spending in 2020. It's likely that that figure is going to be the same, if not more, in 2021. So there's huge opportunities here from, for app developers, teams that, work on those kind of products. At which I think we're very much thinking about connected journeys. So very much about retention, but because at which we have many verticals. So we have core products, for example, our lab tested product reviews. We have other products and services such as Trusted Traders, which is our endorsement scheme for you to find a trader like an electrician or a plumber to fix certain problems in your home, and so on and so forth. We've got numerous other services, and we need to think about ways in which we connect those services together to form a really coherent experience for our members. So, Eloise, you found a washing machine on Which. Well, how can we help you then find a trader to fit that washing machine in and plumb it in? And hey, while you're here, why not surface some relevant content to you about how to clean your washing machine or how to keep it, to maintain the upkeep. So we kind of see this as there being multiple entry points into the customer journey. So we have to find ways of being relevant at the right time and making sure we're kind of taking you on a journey to what's relevant to you. And I think for most brands, Which included, it's probably more cost effective to retain users than it is to acquire new ones. Most of our audience, 70% in fact, are already using their smartphone when they interact with us, and that's including the website. So when we think of the question of acquisition versus retention, it's also closely coupled with how broad do we go across all of those products and services for the app versus how deep do we go in solving a specific problem and doing that really well. So for the app, I mean, I mentioned at the beginning that we're going on a journey now of rebuilding the app and really thinking about the long-term strategy of mobile. And our initial focus is going to be specifically on retention. How can we keep our existing members engaged with the app, find more value from the other products and services that we offer that they may not be familiar with? But we have to also be careful not to alienate or confuse users with something that's brand new. We're going to be rebuilding the app, and if we build too many things in, it has there's a risk of kind of losing existing users. So I think once we've built the new app, and we've got this into the app stores, we then have to kind of work on a strategy for how we scale up, and then think a lot more broadly around acquisition and retention, and having a really healthy balance between the two.
Great, thanks, Amrik. What about you, Leah?
It's very interesting as a question. We launched the app 2 months ago in January. So you'd think acquisition is the most important part of it, right? It's a new company, it's a new brand. Without any focus on acquisition, we wouldn't have any people using the app. But when we look at it, really, is what's the point of acquiring user if people don't stay around on your app? If your app doesn't deliver the value and you don't have that core experience that make people come back, what's the point of acquiring them? It's money's burn, right? Really. So for us, retention is definitely the core focus, and we very much focus on that. And there's many different ways to look at retention, actually, and I found what Jasper was saying very interesting, because retention is a latent indicator of success. Realistically, you can't focus on retention. Retention is your objective, it is what you're looking towards, but by the time you get there, it's too late. So you have to focus on much earlier indicator of that and understand what's going to trigger retention. So I guess this is where we are focused. It's very early days retention, really. And we heard that earlier as well in one of the talk about how, you know, you first focus on your very short-term retention, then medium-term, and then long-term retention, with the kind of assumption that if you get short-term, it would impact medium-term, and if you get medium-term, it would impact long-term retention as well. So for us, that's where we are in that journey. We were very much focusing those early days retention, and even before that, focus on what are the key action, what are those key behavior we can already see that will trigger retention. What is the experience people must have on their day of download, on their day of registration straight away, that pretty much guarantee that they will get the full value of the app, they will get the full value of the experience, and they will come back. So that's where we focused at.
That's great. And I saw a tweet actually a couple of days ago from John Lai, and he posted that apps are like games in disguise, and he called out brands like Calm, Strava, I think Chime was another brand, for embracing that game-like design that creates that fun experience and leads to greater retention. What are your thoughts on that? Maybe Leah, if we start with you, I mean, do you place a lot of importance on sort of game-like design and people having fun in the app to bring them back?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have a lot of gamification in the app just yet, but it's definitely something we're looking at and we're thinking about. But I think the core of what he was saying is not necessarily to have a game in the app, but it's more about rewarding the experience. So as a game, what you play, you win, there's always some sort of reward. There's an objective, there's something to look forward to, there's something you can achieve. And it's kind of taking that principle and taking it towards something different, which for us is more about learning and acquiring knowledge, and thinking how can we apply it to this experience? So how can we reward people because they've learned something new? How can we make you feel good about the fact that you chose to spend your time into acquiring knowledge? And this is where those principles come into consideration. And I think it's quite interesting how that translates in the app, which might be a bit of gamification element, but it might also be something a bit more subtle, a bit more light.
Yep.
I really like that as well. I think that's an interesting one. In almost every one of our products, I guarantee there's like a success state that we could all say, whether that's like, in yours, Leah, completing a lesson, or in Amrit, yours is like, maybe it's getting information and someone purchasing and booking a washing machine installation or something like that. And it's in e-commerce, I find it so depressingly sad when people are just showing a confirmation page at the end of a purchase. And it's like, thanks, done. Like, I don't know why we choose to put so much delight into like learning and gaming and other apps, and e-commerce is so dull. So we've tried to do this, and it was just really a fun thing to do, where we show confetti on the order confirmation page, and it's like, it sounds naff, but I think things like that, where you celebrate someone doing a good thing, like they're the unquantifiable delighters that you experience in a thing, which is just like, oh, that puts a little smile on my face, like I've done a good thing. And I think they're so hard to track. When it comes to retention, you'd never say A/B test that confetti and what impact does it have on retention, but it's those ones where you're like, does it put a smile on my face? Does it feel nice? Yeah, all right, let's do it. That I think really helped a lot as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I find this topic fascinating, and generally I really agree with the sort of sentiment of it. I think when I unpack this, it also kind of makes me think there's a lot of behavioral science involved in, these feedback loops, and, Jasper, in your case, the confetti, what does it do in that user's mind that makes them smile? They kind of feel like, right, I want to come back. That was a really nice experience. And it's probably, more likely that you'll drive higher retention because it's fun to use. I think at which we haven't really traditionally thought about embracing game-like designs or those kind of gamification features. So it is quite a new concept for us to bring in, and but it is something that we are looking at, and we're thinking about ways in which we can bring that in. We have quite a big community on the Which website, so what can we do with that? Perhaps finding ways to make sharing products. You found a washing machine, how might you share that with other people, or share that experience with other people as well? Perhaps there's something in how we help our members to kind of showcase the value in which they're helping others. If you kind of report a scam, last year we've seen a huge rise in COVID and vaccine related scams. If you're reporting those scams and you're helping others, how might we bring in the gamification? How many people have you helped, and those kind of things? So I think there's a lot that we're thinking about, but we haven't quite nailed the right way to bring that in yet.
Yeah, I personally have been a victim of a few of those scams, or not a victim, but I've absolutely seen an increase in that. So I love this idea around, it doesn't have to be, an in-your-face game, but there can be some more subtle context behind the feel-good elements, the winning, the you've done something good for yourself or for the community. So I really love all those ideas that just came out. Not to jump too off topic, but Amrik, there's been a question that's come through in the chat for you, and I thought we'd just quickly touch on it before we jump into maybe talking about some of those metrics that we just touched on earlier. So the question for you, Amrik, is you mentioned a big focus is developing a new app this year. Are you going to be developing that in-house, or will you be looking for an external agency to support?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, actually. So Which is on, I mentioned at the beginning, we're on this journey of becoming a lot more product centric, a lot more product led in how we think about the products we build. And that goes across every one of our product portfolios, including the app. And I think as part of that, bringing development in-house so that we have the capability to move quickly, to respond to change, to build out the experience and keep that knowledge within the team is really important. Not to say that building something with an external partner isn't the right way to go. I think there's definitely a lot of scenarios where that is the right decision to make. But I think given where Which is on its journey right now, we've brought all the development in-house. We're building everything from the ground up. And I think for the longer term vision for what we're trying to create with those connected journeys across all of our different products, to have all of that knowledge within the team working cross-functionally with marketing, our commercial stakeholders, our finance team, and so on and so forth, it kind of makes sense that that knowledge is within the team.
Great, awesome. And Sam, if you wanted to connect with Amrik after this, I'm sure Amrik, you'll be around in the chat to be able to answer any follow-up questions.
I will, yeah.
Brilliant. So we've talked a lot about retention, and then also, Jasper, you just mentioned a few moments ago sort of that testing element, right? And I know we were talking about confetti at that point in time, but I think, I work with a lot of customers that are continuously testing in the app to figure out what's working, what's not working, and how do they therefore make those improvements. I'll give you a really quick example. So Calm recognized that user engagement was highest in the first hour of downloading an app, and they actually found that through testing in their new user onboarding flow, and they quickly saw that users who were sent down sort of the shortest path were actually engaging at a much higher rate than those who were sent down a longer path of engagement. So I'm really curious, what type of testing do you do at your companies, and what are the KPIs that you're keeping an eye on to measure success, and particularly when it comes to retention strategies?
Yeah, sure. So one of the ones that we're looking at the minute, it's come about from, there's a few sources that lead to us running A/B tests, and often you'll be looking at the data for how customers are performing at scale, and then that will then spawn you actually looking at some sort of customer research that will try and answer the questions behind it. So we know that customers are coming to us across multiple sessions, and we know that returning customers tend to take a bit longer than new customers. We had some assumptions there, I think it's people that are browsing more. Maybe a new customer comes to us because they're like, oh crap, I need to get a card instantly. Now they've got the app, then they're a bit more relaxed. So you see the data and you then do the research to try and understand the reasons why. Well, we've been looking at, a few years ago, a Jobs We Done study on the outcome of buying a card for someone. And looking at the different things that go into the job map, we learned that, you know, people don't just decide, I'm going to buy a card and then buy a card. And I think that's probably the same with a lot of products. There's 2 phases beforehand where people think, I should get a card for my dad, and they'll maybe have a little browse around, think about it, and they'll leave it for a couple of days and then come back when it's, you know, 1-2 days before the occasion and they really need to get it then. So we see that interest in behavior coming through from our data. The Jobs We've Done analysis showed us, you know, this is how customers are thinking at that point in time. So we've been looking at personalization a lot at Moonpig recently, looking at, you know, the vast wealth of customer data we have from 20 years of people buying for their family, and we know quite a bit there. But what we're looking at the minute is how we can personalize the session based on what you did last time. And it's pretty simple stuff. You see it, I'm sure you saw it on Amazon when you were doing your research for your washing machine. You know, you come one day for a washing machine, that's what you see all over the Amazon homepage the next day. And, you know, we laugh at it, but it is powerful. It's about connecting journeys. So we're trying to avoid thinking of it with the app as just a session. So Amrit mentioned people are not their phones 60 times a day. And I think that's the thing you see with games is they're snackable. Like you open it, you do a little bit, you put it away. It's not like where you're doing something on a desktop where you open it, it's a big ordeal. You're going to do some research, you're going to get something done. So when we're thinking about app, it's about those connecting multiple snackable sessions. So we're going to start showing you your recent products that you viewed last time on the homepage to allow you to just pick up where you left off. And that's something that came about from looking at the data, then doing the research, then coming up with some ideas that we're then you know, prototyping and testing with customers to understand, you know, usability, things like that, and sentiment. And the plan then is that we'll A/B test those features. So there's a wider strategy around research that we're doing that will spawn quite a few different A/B tests in this area. But yeah, we do tend to A/B test a lot of our decisions at Moonpig, and you know, it's so easy for you to think that something's going to be a complete knock out the park experiment, and then I think a lot of us have felt the experience of just scratching your head, not being able to understand why it's failed. Like, it was such a sure win. All the user testing said it was perfect. I don't know what's the problem. And then you maybe take your finished product, you put it through moderated testing, and in 5 of them you find out, oh, here's where the issue is. It's loading time, or it's something that you just haven't accounted for. So yeah, I think the thing that I find so interesting about product management is the, you know, behavioral science that goes behind our decision making, the behavioral design. And it is a science that we just don't fully understand, and we have assumptions and theories behind it, but the way people react in the real world, in the context of use, whether they're, you know, sat at home or on the tube, is completely different. So yeah, the A/B testing is so important for those things that will just completely uncover why it wasn't perhaps the best thing to do. That's not to say we A/B test everything. There's a lot of things where, you know, I've talked about confetti and those little delighters and things like that, where their gut feel and we think it's the right thing. So A/B testing for us is really about learning, and that's why we A/B test. There's other things you do for optimization, but yeah, that's why we A/B test, and hopefully that gives you a bit of an example of how we're thinking.
Definitely does. And Leah, you mentioned before, sort of these early indicators are really what you look at instead of kind of those end state retention figures. So can you share a little bit more about exactly what those early indicators are for you?
Yeah, sure. So our entire format is centered around something we call a hack. So those are like 5-minute stories with insights. And what we realize is, if during the first day, during the day of registration, people go through and complete that hack, their retention is automatically much greater. And looking at our big data, we then run a lot of user testing and more qualitative data, study to understand, you know, why what was that the case. And it became very clear to us that if people finish the hack, they experience the full value of the product, and they straight away understand if that's something for them or not, and what does the product do for them. So once we we know that once we know that actually getting the majority of our user to finish a hack in the first user experience, you can optimize towards something that's very clear and very early in the journey. And by default, it will then impact retention. So what we've done and what we're currently doing is a series of tests, actually, from user testing or A/B testing as well. We kind of embrace that straight away from the beginning. That very much focus on everything that happened between the moment you discover our app and you finishing that first hack. So how can we remove as much barrier as possible to get you access to the content faster so you can then get the value and come back? And that's what we're doing. We optimize this early flow and get you as quickly as possible in front of the hack, which is the real value of the app. And then it's up to you as a person to decide if that's for you or not. And it turns out most people actually do like it and come back. So yeah, that's how we look at it at the moment.
Fantastic. I'm conscious that time has absolutely flown and we only have a couple of minutes left. I thought, if it's all right with you, Amrik, and no apologies, I'm skipping over you when it comes to metrics, but we've had a question and I think it would lead us nicely into closing on this from the chat, which is around that voice of the customer, and how you sort of seek feedback from your customers, what you do to listen to them, and then how that influences sort of the ongoing development of your app. So maybe we'll start with you, Amrik, that would be great, and hear about your voice of the customer, and then spend a minute on Leah and Jasper as well to round things out.
Yeah, no, definitely. We very much think about connected journeys, as I mentioned before, at a larger scale. So you're looking for a washing machine, can we help you find the right one? But then can we help you do other things that you might need to be doing as well? So it's really about being relevant at the right time. And then when I think about the voice of the customer in that context, we have multiple sources of input from our members. Firstly, we speak to members ourselves. So that's the product person in squads, UX, the engineers as well. So we're all kind of active in those research sessions with the support from our user researchers. We also work really closely with our call center colleagues. We read App Store reviews daily. So we have a Slack integration that just pings us every day with the latest review so that we never have to go and find it ourselves. It comes to us. And then we also look at the data as that kind of represents, as Jasper mentioned, with those A/B tests. You kind of never really fully know whether something is going to work unless it's out there. And I think a good example of how we kind of bring the voice of the customer into the product roadmap. So we've just completed a round of contextual research where we've spoken to actual members and had really broad conversations about a recent big purchase that they've made and the role that the app played in that buying journey. And I think through this research, we've really uncovered so much understanding about the mindset that our users are in when they open the app. And right now, our members are in a very active mindset. I know what I want, just help me get to the product really quickly. And it's made us think a lot about how we might tap into people's passive mindset, where you're in that exploratory phase, you're not really sure what you're looking for, you're just browsing and there's no real intention. You just might stumble upon something that's interesting. And then when we get into sort of specific feedback, we have this balance between kind of the big bets that we're kind of aiming for, as well as there are going to be quick wins, things that we just need to fix or things that we just need to do. And we just try to have a really healthy balance between those small quick wins, those small things that we just need to get done in the app versus those bigger bets.
Great. Well, I'm really sorry, Leah and Jasper, but we're right on the timer. I think, we should get a whole nother section at the next App Promotion Summit just to talk about metrics and user feedback. And there's also a question around how often you look at your competitor apps as well in the chat. So I'll nudge James and maybe we can all come back next time and talk about that for a round two. But thank you so much for your time today, for all of your transparency around what you're working on. I, for one, will be going and downloading each of your apps. Yeah, I look forward to seeing what you come up with in the future. So a big thank you again, and a thank you to everyone on the line for joining us.
Thank you, Eloise.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.